is still very present in the mere culture. And culture is defined as that knowledge, the custom, the values that have been passed down from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. And as a result of that, it becomes systemic to the point that people have these ill feelings and untruths, and that they act on them. Dr. Gordon Allport would always talk about, in the nature of prejudice, acts on prejudice, and how this whole notion that people think in very negative ways about others because of perceptions or misperceptions of others, but they act in very negative ways toward them.
You know, I heard it said quite recently that the election of President Obama might have meant that a non-racial kind of society will be issued in. Now, speak to that. I mean, because I think that's and what you're saying here is that as long as we have memory, we're going to have a problem of race in America, because we can never forget slavery, we can never forget segregation, we can never forget any of those things. And so, I mean, speak to that.
Yeah, very good, because that is referred to as a post-racial society. And we have a number of people, unfortunately many of the millennials, who have lived and benefited from the struggles of that earlier time period, now feel that, oh, racism has been eradicated, that we live in a post-racial society, that if you just do X, Y, and Z, then you can be successful. And they are really misinformed and misdirected to think that everything has indeed been eradicated. That's why when we look at this particular election of Trump, we can see how a vast majority of people have certain thoughts out there that are very racially intended, and how a particular person that way could make certain comments and everyone else could cheer in favorable toward them. Because this notion of a post-racial or post-racism is just untrue.
So over this last half minute that we have here, there can never be a post-racial society as long as we have memory in America of what race is and what race was.
That's absolutely correct.
Will always come back, no matter what the movements might be. I think you've indicated that the election of President Obama meant that we might have reached that point, but still we get another person with the memory of Mr. Trump, for example, will bring that back more than ever.
Absolutely.
Is that what we're saying?
That's absolutely what we are saying.
Very good. And so what we'll do, we'll take this second commercial break, and then we'll give you an opportunity to expand on this idea. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. It can be, in other words, there should be a period where race will be forgotten.
That's right.
You see, and you can't forget race as long as you can remember. If you remember the history, then race is always present.
That's right. Absolutely. And then the sad part, even if you don't, but with that operating out there in that way, people like the guy in South Carolina, that's what's kind of disturbing. He's so young, but had that in his mind to go in there and kill people. And even in his defense said, I'm not sorry, that's how I think and feel. Now, he wasn't born that way. So what was going on within his environment from birth to that young age of 20, 21 that would make him go in there and do that? It must have been something very hateful. But you just, and you walk in there and people are loving, giving, praying with you, and then you pull out a gun and shoot them.
Or the fellow that walked through the airport in Florida.
In Florida, same thing. Just start shooting.
Took out a gun and just started shooting.
That's right.
Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. EKSanford from Tennessee State University, and the topic is the impact of systemic racism and inequality in America. And so, Doctor, let's pick up where we left off and use the last few minutes that we have of this show to sort of expand and to educate our audience in reference to some of the issues that we're dealing with here.
Okay. Yes, and you brought up in the last segment that whole notion of memory, and I think that memory is very much defined in the systemic aspect. It's so ingrained in the very fabric or culture in which we live in. Not only for African Americans and other people of color, but for women as well. That ceiling still hasn't been broken. But I also want to try to share some invisible aspects of that systemic or in that memory. In many instances, and we may not ever think about it, but there are so many institutions that are still present within our society because of the history has left people out. And if we would do a cursory look, and I challenge people to go in and Google and kind of pull up different orchestras throughout the United States and take a glimpse at the pictures there and see if you see an African American string players within those orchestras. And if you did that, you would probably end up saying, well, maybe I saw one or two, but that would be it. And you would think about looking at slavery, if you think about roots and Fiddler in the Roots, that you knew people could then indeed play. But there was something ingrained in the society that indicated that people, even if they had an interest in wanting to play a string instrument, by law they could not. And even if they got well enough to play, there was something systemic in the institution of fairness that was inequality that said you could not be a part of the orchestra. And there are plenty of people, if you look at the literature, but one person by the name of Eddie South, whether people are familiar with this person, Heifetz was considered one of the greatest violinists in the country. And he went to New Orleans because he heard about this person that he had to perform that night by the name of Eddie South. And he went and played the piece that he was going to perform as a solo, Heifetz did, with Eddie South, and note for note, Eddie South was able to play. He said, my goodness, you should be able to play anywhere in the world. But because of the pigmentation of his skin,